Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Sam and this is The Lonely Chapter, a show where we speak to interesting people, finding out their stories, discovering what motivates them, whilst also learning from their highs and their lows. Today we are learning from Roland Baxter. He's an officer in the British Army. We'll be finding out why the military has always appealed to him, what some of the toughest moments in training were, and how it compares to his expectations before joining. Thank you for listening. This one was made for your enjoyment. I've known you for almost 20 years now, and for as long as I can remember, you've wanted to go into the military. How did the idea first enter your mind, and what do you think appealed to you so much at that time?
I think by that time, you're kind of thinking about, my immediate childhood. I think we became probably friends in year 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing. And I think at the time, I was looking to be part of something slightly bigger than myself. I think I wanted a cool uniform, fundamentally. I wanted to travel the world and fight bad guys was the immediate vibe, I'd say.
Nice.
The immediate pull, because I was a kid. And I played with guns and stuff, and or tried to play with imaginary guns. Yeah, toy guns. Born and raised in the UK. So that was the fundamental pull. I was just a kid who watched lots of cool movies and stuff as a boy, and that watched a lot of Terminator war films. Probably watched Platoon far too young, that kind of stuff. But I think probably the real inspiration, a real push towards it, was probably hearing stories about my granddad, I'd say. He was quite aloof when I was a quite young kid. Unfortunately, he died when I was 7. But after he died, kind of my view of him changed quite a lot, because we found all his war records, which is really interesting. And he travelled the world in the regiment that I ultimately joined, and did all sorts of really cool things. A load of cool things that people probably haven't even heard of, like, fought the Red Wolves of Radfan and Aden and stuff, like, just really cool things no one even knows about.
Awesome.
Which is Yemen now, which is really cool. Got shot doing that. Went to Malaya, did the Malayan emergency, which is, again, a huge piece of history that is kind of slept on. So had like a really cool service record. And for one reason or another, and probably something we'll cover a bit later, I didn't really have a strong father figure in my life. So you kind of skip one and look at the next guy in the line. That was my granddad, and I was like, what he did was cool.
Yeah.
And that's something that sounds like a piece of me. So.
And did you know he was in the military before he passed? I assume you knew he was in the military, but you didn't know the stories behind what he'd done necessarily.
No, so my mum would tell me, and it was his entire personality. He was like quite hard work, to be honest, mate. He was a Scouser, and he was a sergeant major when he left the army, and it just never went away. So he was just really shouty, a bit hard work. It wasn't nice to me as a kid, but I think he meant well.
Yeah, it's nice to hear how your view sort of changed after the fact as well. It's quite nice looking back at those memories. So young Roland is keen. He's watched some pretty cool movies, and in his teenage years, I suppose the first step of getting into that world a bit would be cadets. So do you remember how old you were when you started cadets? And
I was 14, and you're right. I think it's not officially, a recruitment tool, but there are a lot of people who go into cadets like it, and you see that as a stepping stone to go do something else. But you never mention it when you're in, ever. You die with it, So I'll take this L for now. But so essentially, I was 14. My mum knew that I wanted to join the army, so she was like wandering around Wandsworth where she worked, and she saw that there was a reserve centre. And she was like, why don't you just go there and have a look and see what they have? And I was like, okay. And there was a leaflet, and it said, come at this time. And it was like for the Royal Signals Reserve Unit. And I went, and no one asked me any questions or anything. I was a 14-year-old kid, right? No one asked me any questions. I just like walked up to this thing, and it was like this big open day where they talk about this equipment. And I was asking all these questions, and it was doing like memory games and like doing all these tests and things. And then at the end, they had us all in this room. It was like, here's your paperwork. Like, just sign up. and then we'll get you a date for when you can come in and a test, and then do your training. And I was like, yeah, sounds good. Cadet sounds lit. Fucking do it.
Training for cadets?
No, mate. So
okay, go on, elaborate.
Yeah, so they had me this form, and I was like, oh, sick, sounds good to me. And it was like date of birth, and then it started to click in my head, and I was like, wait a sec. And I went up to the lady running it, as a sergeant, and she was like, you're 14. And I was like, yeah. And she was like, yeah, right, yeah, you can't. You're a bit young, mate, to join
so you're at the actual
territorial
reserves.
army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, well, damn, I'm looking for the cadets. She was like, it's downstairs on the right.
Next door.
Yeah, I was there for 3 hours, mate. Like, I was there for a long time. Unfortunately, the cadets weren't in that day, but she gave me the number, and I called them, and then I started going to cadets.
Yeah, what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I think a really important stepping stone in my life. I think without it, I probably wouldn't have done as well in life up to now. It exposes you to like key skills and useful things that you can use in everyday life. It doesn't have to be the military or anything like that. Like you develop leadership skills. My biggest weakness at that point when I joined was probably like any form of public speaking. Hated it, couldn't do it. Forces you to do that, and obviously there's the military aspects as well, discipline, being fit, that kind of stuff. And because I joined the unit, I did like really good role models, and I think there have been like horror stories about like cadet forces all over the country about certain instructors, like the quality, who they are, criminal stuff, that kind of thing. But I got so lucky. Like my detachment commander, I guess they call them, he was like 23, keen as mustard. Cared a lot about the people in the thing, would help them with everything. It's really good. I'm still in touch with him now, and he's doing really well. But those kind of people, investing in young people is super important. And I think without that, I don't know if I would have done as well in the army as I perhaps have.
Yeah. It sounds like it's got a really important place, especially in this modern day where you've got social media and your phones constantly on you 24/7, trying to take your attention away from you at every point. So it sounds like it offers quite a lot in terms of combating that for the time you're there and giving people skills that they may otherwise not learn, essentially.
I agree with you. I think at the time, social media was definitely a thing, but I only had one of them really cool flip phones with a keyboard.
Yeah.
So I couldn't do any of that.
The sideways slide.
Yeah, you know it.
I know.
You know it well.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a whole lot of that, and it was just a really good excuse to like leave the humdrum of the city, a few weekends a year for 2 weeks summer camp, that kind of thing, and do something really interesting. And when you do it for a long time, you obviously, they promote you and stuff, and you get ranks and stuff, and you get more responsibility. And as young people, that's really good. Like, I was in charge of 7 other people in a section at 16, which was really cool. And you'd go and fire blanks together and stuff, and it gave me leadership and taught me how to instruct and teach, and just generally, I just think confidence just squared away my confidence big time. If I hadn't done it, genuinely, might not have been as confident in the way I conducted myself later in life in a load of different areas.
No, it sounds like it had a big impact. That's really good.
Yeah.
Going forward then to joining the army, the first steps into that, I think you said, was it attestation?
So not quite, slightly different for an officer, but attestation's where you, I believe it's attestation. Probably someone's probably going to cancel me or something, but it's where you literally you stand up and you just swear your allegiance to the king, or for me, the queen at the time.
Right.
You do that when you're in, kind of thing. I did it as a reservist years ago, but you also do it when you actually get to Sandhurst. But yeah, there's a whole load of steps before you get there to do that.
So what's the first step, and how did you feel on that day, if you can remember it?
Yeah, I think I can. So I think so. A good golden thread for like this, like my progression and actually getting into the military, is probably looking at like confidence and self-worth, and how you value yourself. I wanted to be an officer, and I went to college, so it made sense because I had A-levels. I had the opportunity to do that, to apply to the process and do it. The first step is you go and have an interview with your local kind of career manager dude, officer career manager guy. Mine was a colonel when he was in Whitehall in London. And I had 2 interviews with this man. The first one, I went in there in what was effectively like a shirt, like just a shirt, like a sweater vest, and like I looked like I was in school uniform, right? And I went in there, and this guy was asking me like questions about why should you be a leader, asking me about current affairs, and I was like woefully unprepared, mate, woefully. And I was saying dumb stuff, mate. The things I can't even remember now, but like just silly things that just don't promote confidence. Anyway, at the end of it, obviously a good guy. I found out later he was in Aden at the similar time to my granddad, which was very interesting. Okay. Yeah, he's an really old guy, really old. He basically said, like, listen, you need a couple of years, come back later. I was only 14, 15 when I did that. So I really hadn't done any real development other than this was like my first real step. And I was like, okay. And he was like, go on these courses, go on these insight courses for 2 weeks, go and see what the army actually is. So I was like, I was down the dumps after that. I was like, I'm not the right person. You know, maybe I'm not middle class enough. Maybe that's what I'm definitely middle class, but maybe I'm not. yeah, I absolutely am.
Just a preface.
Yeah. We're like, maybe I'm not this. You know, maybe I'm not the type of person they want. You know, don't come from enough money. X, Y, and Z. Just all these like preconceptions and inhibitions in my head. I went and did these 2 week kind of things alongside obviously doing cadets, going to college, and all this stuff. And it highlighted like the level of fitness I'd need, the preparation I need to undertake, and I started being much more proactive about it. I found the process like quite daunting because I don't know if you're similar, but like when you know that there's a huge step you need to take in your life and who knows what it will lead to, it's quite daunting to actually go and do it. So I'd put things off for a while, or I wouldn't make that phone call I need to make to go and redo the interview or do X, Y, and Z. And then, when I finally got round to it a couple of years later, done loads of research, had my head screwed on correctly, did all right at college, went back for that interview, same guy, and he was like, I remember you from last time, you're wearing a suit, that's really good. And then, just asked me questions and I nailed it, and he was like, that's really good. We'll start the process, we'll get the ball rolling. And I was still quite young at that stage, and at the time I was quite keen on going to a place called Welbeck, which is where you do your A-levels at your A-levels, but it's like an army college. Okay. And the guarantee is at the end you go to like you join a corps, so like engineers, signals.
Yeah.
I was like, that sounds great. So I did that. Obviously, bungled my GCSEs. Or I didn't bungle them, but I didn't do well enough in the sciences and maths to then go there, right? So they were like, that's not for you, but the option is you just go the regular way and then see what happens. And I was like, works for me. I can do that. Went to normal college, nailed that. Well, I say nailed that, did that. And it just went from there really. And I was just researching, getting my kind of life together before I went on that. I didn't actually do the next stage till I was at university.
That's awesome. Yeah, the thing you mentioned about when you're taking that next big step in life as well, and that feeling of putting things off, I think is such a common thing. And I can't remember who said it, but I've heard it recently, and they were talking about in that moment, think of the cost of inaction. The cost of inaction is something that we don't think there is a cost to it, but there is a cost to it, because if you don't do anything, you're stagnating, and a year later you're still in that exact same position, and you'll never know. So yeah, that's really sort of resonating. Yeah. So going into Sandhurst for the first time, so we're skipping forward a little bit, I suppose, but you've done your A-levels, you've applied to Sandhurst. You've got the go-ahead, you pull in Sandhurst, and this is you now. How are you feeling?
Yeah, like really, really nervous, mate. Yeah, so like all those inhibitions I was speaking to you about, so I obviously did well enough to get in. You do a 4-day long test and a 2-day long, 2-day and then a 4-day long test, and then they send you a letter, tell you if you've got a place or not.
A 4-day long test?
Yeah, so you go and live in this place where they select officers.
Oh, wow.
It's in the West Country. It's got a load of obstacle courses and stuff on it. It's like pretty cliche, like army camp. Nice. And then they just give you loads of interviews and stuff, which is cool. It's so harrowing 4 days, to be honest.
It's pretty intense.
So it's just, they're testing your speaking skills, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, regardless, did that. Did well. Passed. I saw my report years later and it didn't sound like I did well, but yeah, I was a raw product at the time, so it makes sense. But so arrive at Sandhurst, a dream of mine. It was, even after I'd passed that test, it was a bit of a roller coaster, which we can touch on later. But yeah, to actually get to the doors of Sandhurst was a ball ache for me for a number of reasons. But we got there, and yeah, super nervous. There were like I still had inhibitions about the quality of my character, who I am. Could I actually be this? Could I lead men in battle? Am I capable of doing it? The worst case, could I lead men in battle? Am I the right character? Do I need more money to be here? That kind of like really silly things like that, which a lot of it turned out to be absolutely fugazi, as they call it, or bogus. But yeah, really nervous when I got there, and you know me quite well. I'm not a particularly neat individual, but
Don't put yourself down.
I'm better now, mate. But genuinely, and this sounds really dumb saying it, but one of my biggest fears was like not being like rigid and ordered enough, and not getting my ironing right, and just being backward and forward doing that nonsense for ages.
Well, people may think that's weird and like a small thing, but that's a massive part of it, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like, that's something that's drilled into you.
Making your bed, standing up straight, all that good stuff, and ironing your kit and folding your shirts in little pieces of paper and stuff like that. And I thought, at the time I was like, this is nonsensical. I'm up till 2 a.m. doing this, but yeah, I did well enough. And my mum used to just shout at me all the time and like, when you join the army, you're going to be like, they're going to turn you around, and like almost out of spite, I refused to let it like turn me into this like clean freak, this neat guy. But yeah, that yeah, and I had my fair share of show praise and whatever for that. But yeah, super nervous about a load of things when I got there. But soon enough, you make friends, and I was in that year's Sovereign's platoon, so like the best platoon in Sandhurst, which was really good. So a really good quality of officer that came out of our platoon, and obviously everyone in that corridor is your friend fundamentally, and it was like really good. And I was quite sad to go at the end, despite the fact that there were some traumatic times there, but it was genuinely really good.
How long is training there?
44 weeks at Sandhurst.
Okay.
Well, phase 1, yeah. So like everyone does that, and then you go on to whatever you specialise in after.
Yeah. And what was that like? Was it what you'd expected going into it? Was there things you sort of didn't see coming, or?
It's what I expected fundamentally. I'd watched all the documentaries and stuff. I felt like I was pretty read in, if you will, as to what they were going to do to me, or try and make me into when I was there. A lot of it was like quite difficult, as you can imagine, but it is fundamentally, I think it was what was expected.
Yeah.
There were certain things that had changed from what I'd seen over the years. Like for example, you got a little bit more sleep, I think, when I did it than a few years before, or whatever. Which is obviously very important. Although you speak to people going through now and they're still not sleeping, so little things like that.
Maybe the individual.
Yeah, individual preferences and whatnot. But yeah, fundamentally, an enjoyable, good time because of the community there.
Yeah, it sounds like that first interview you did when you were 14, speaking to the colonel, kicked you into gear, and you got prepped. You learned everything you needed to learn. You looked at the videos of what Sandhurst was like. You knew everything ahead of time, which is a really good thing.
Yeah.
During that training, or the training to follow, were there any times where you started to doubt whether it was the right decision for you, or question why you were doing it?
I think there's probably, I'd say, about 3 times in the military where I've been like, what am I doing? Like, what actually am I doing? This is mad. None of them have been particularly dangerous. Some have been, it's just again, your self-worth and how you actually treat yourself and consider yourself. Like fundamentally, when you're at Sandhurst, you're learning. You are a student at a school, like, and there were times when, I'd had 2 hours sleep and I've got to do all of this, and I'm just sitting at the edge of my bed in my room. I'm not sitting on the edge of my bed in my room because that would mess it up. I'm sitting on the floor at the edge of my bed in my room, thinking like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I messing myself around? I guess that's probably one of them. One of them came a lot later on operations, and then, when you finish Sandhurst, you go to like specific training for the infantry, which is what I got into. You go to Brecon, which is lovely if you're going there on holiday, and awful if the army's taking you. They book the weather special and stuff. And I remember I was put in the platoon sergeant appointment. My whole job was to just make sure everyone had enough ammunition and things. And as a platoon, we'd agreed that because we had to run to the next defensive position 3 miles with everything, with a stretcher, and it was just really hard work. And the platoon sergeant before me, very intelligently, had backloaded 90% of our ammunition. And obviously you need ammunition to fight the enemy. Okay, so as soon as we got to the defensive position, they changed us around. Like, Baxter, you are now platoon sergeant. And I was like, brilliant. And I start getting to work digging this defensive position. I just literally didn't think about that ammunition at all, right? Didn't think about it at all. Platoon commander's like, yeah, I'm now going to plan a raid for this morning, 4 a.m. We're going to punch out. We're going to raid this building. I need you to just square everything. I'm like, brilliant. 2 hours before we step off, it's become abundantly clear to me that there is no ammunition to be found. Everyone's got like a magazine each. Like, it would just be catastrophic. I was sending people running to get ammunition from other platoons. I was fighting for my life. I was giving people my ammo because I wouldn't be fighting, like, kind of thing. I'd be at that. And I was on the radio to this bloke who had our ammo, and he just wasn't coming. He's probably asleep or whatever. And we gave a set of orders, and when I read the ammo state in my part of the orders, the instructor listening was like, "What?" Because you do it on time, so you say, "I have 2 minutes of rapid fire on this weapon." And I was like, I have 7.5 seconds or whatever. Like, I have 3 seconds of rapid fire on this weapon or something stupid. And he was like, what? And I was like, well, slight situation we're in. This has happened. And he's like, okay. And obviously that was a massive catastrophic failure for me. But we did the thing, and it was the quickest raid in the universe. Just ran in, shot the guy with what we had, and then left, like, did it. But I remember they kept me on as almost like a mini punishment. I was on. You don't usually keep a command point for longer than 24 hours. I was on for like 48, hadn't slept in rag. And I was in this trench, digging this trench with a mate of mine. And I sat down in this trench and I was like, Jim, I'm letting the team down here. I might just sack it, mate. What's the point? There's no sacking it, mate. I can't just quit. I was like, this isn't for me, I don't think. And he was like, he literally just looked up and was like, shut up. He just got on. And I was like, you're probably
That's
right.
what you need in that moment.
Yeah, I was like, you're probably right, mate. Yeah. And
no logic.
I just cracked. I was like, shut up. I was like, okay, crack up. Yeah, and then the third time's a little sadder, so we'll part that for now. But we can come on to it a bit later. But it's like it has happened, absolutely. Like you wonder why you're there, but
you mentioned in there about the Brecons and how special they are. I think it was Foxy off SAS Who Dares Wins who I heard talking about it, and he was saying it's the reason why the British military and special forces are some of the best in the world is because of the Brecons and how unpredictable the weather is. Just how brutal the terrain is. Yeah,
it can be like, I think on those exercises it was a summer, like the heat of summer, and it got as high as like 36 degrees. It was just ridiculous. And then you got the opposite when the Beast from the East came in, like the year before, it was like minus 18 or something stupid. And then obviously everything is up 700 meters, and you think, oh, good, at least when I'm up, it's drier, and then there's a marsh there, and you're like, how has this happened? Like, what place allows this? Like, there's no, like, physics doesn't work there, nothing works there, everything's just wet all the time.
I can see you getting angry as we're talking.
Nothing makes any sense. It's just like silly. But yeah, you're right. You just need grit. Everything's uphill, man.
Yeah,
everything, and you're carrying all this
downhills
stuff
in the Brecons.
Yeah, people like chasing you, trying to put stuff in your bag and stuff. But yeah, it's an unpleasant place, and I think he's probably right. We're told if you can operate in Brecon, you can operate anywhere.
Yeah,
and it probably makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's right. So coming out of training, you go straight into a role as an officer. Obviously, you're then working in charge of people who have been in the army for a longer time, different ages. You were quite young at the time. What was that like for you going into that role at that age?
Yeah, so when I arrived at battalion, I was 23, and I think my corporals and my sergeant, when I finally got one, was much older, 13 years. Probably had upwards, in the platoon alone, you've probably got like 40, 50 years of actual experience. Some of the lads are very new as well, some of the junior soldiers. But yeah, it's quite, if anyone tells you that they're completely, worry-free when they like turn up at their battalion as at their first job, like they're lying to you. Like, absolutely, it's daunting. You're some fresh bloke just turning up. You'll have all these grand plans and ideas in the back of your head about how things should happen, and you get there and they're like, no, mate, that's part of that. And genuinely, the best way to go about any of that is identify humility in yourself and just take advice from people, learn on the job. If the first 4 months no one's expecting anything of you, you've got this like shield around you, like learn here. And Sandhurst and your phase 2 training is really good at teaching you how to do an attack, mate. How to defeat the enemy in close combat is great, mate. But what it doesn't teach you how to do is how to write someone's report, or escort someone in court, or do X, Y, and Z. And you get there. And
it's the office-based work.
Yeah, and when I first joined as well, it sounds ridiculous. When I joined, it wasn't that long ago, but we had crap computers in the officer's mess and stuff, and like just crap stuff in your office. And it wasn't super easy to get hold of all the policy and all the things like that, which would help you and guide you. So you expect a lot from your brother officers, who aren't always around to help you out and look after you, and not always your brothers either. It can be hard work, but yeah. So it's humility the whole way. Take the beastings as they come. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to learn some pretty harsh lessons, but you absolutely just take advice from everyone. Again, whilst you're taking advice from everyone, you are still the moral arbiter of the platoon. Like you can't be seen doing something that lacks integrity. You can't be caught doing something dumb. You can't be you literally cannot be. You'll be destroyed, got rid of, like binned off immediately. You have to quite literally, even with that lack of experience, understand what's wrong and right, and make sure that's adhered to. Like you can, you see it go wrong when you're too far the other way, where you're best mates with the boys, and you might as well be. They don't need a friend. They've got friends. They need a commander, need a boss. So it's about finding a perfect balance, because you do want to be pally with them. You don't want to help them out. Well, you might not, depending on your character, but that won't help you. I found probably the biggest lesson for me when I first got there is I was worried about where I was from. So I have family from the north, but the regiment I joined was northern, and I'm 100% from London. Yeah. So I was worried when I got there, I'd not get bullied for it, but be treated to a lesser extent because of this. No one gives a shit about where you're from or who you are. Can you do your job? Can you help me? Yes. Good. Nice. Yeah. But let's move on.
Have you got the drive to be better and
to
learn?
Exactly. That's it.
Yeah, I suppose if you walked in there with a cocky attitude, it would be quite easy for them to become disinterested in you. And I suppose, go in with the right attitude. They are going to help you, and they're going to understand that you've just come from training and you need to learn off them, essentially.
Yeah, they'll switch off to you if you're too far the wrong way.
How were they, some of the people who have done longer? Because in some professions, sometimes that can be an issue, and people might get the feeling of, oh, well, I've done 20 years, that they don't know anything. But were they all quite helpful?
Yeah, so my experience was really good, like really positive. When I first arrived, I didn't have a platoon sergeant, which was almost helpful because it left a gap of knowledge which I had to quickly fill. The corporal, the most senior corporal, stepped up into that sergeant role, but he didn't know what he was doing completely yet, so he was still getting a grip of that. And I could then learn everything that a platoon sergeant needs to do admin-wise, which made them then realise that I was doing that as well, which brought me a lot of credibility quite early on. It doesn't require a lot of work, really. It's just like spreadsheets, like getting things together, a bit of administration, like a bit of guidance in that area, all the reports, like all bits like that. When my platoon sergeant did come, like still really good friends with him now. He's super experienced, done all the obvious operations, and just super nice guy. We had loads in common, and I was like, this couldn't be better.
The dream.
We still talk now. But he guided you through the whole way. He says that he walked behind me and just picked up all the stuff I dropped, like literally the
nice
stuff. That's not even metaphorical, mate. Like
literally,
like,
just
bayonets and all sorts. But things like that.
Oh, that's good. You need someone like that.
Looked after you. Also metaphorically did a lot of that stuff as well, which is really nice. And then would advise you from time to time when things got a little bit hairy or you didn't feel comfortable doing certain things.
And I suppose you said earlier about people being not being pally with them, being a commander to them. I suppose those sergeants and those corporals become that sort of midpoint between being pally with them and being exactly where you are.
Exactly.
And they're your sort of middleman, essentially.
So the corporals were my middleman. So the corporals do fighting, and then the lance corporals do admin for the sections. So sergeant it's a weird way of looking at it, but sergeant has the lance corporals and I have the corporals, and they do my day-to-day bits or help me with that, and would lead the section on operations. And then on operations, the sergeant would speak to the lance corporals and make sure everyone's supplied and squared away. It's an interesting dynamic, but
And what benefits or downsides do you think your age, if any, brought you at that time?
So I like to think I know we've only ever spoken about the army and cadets and stuff, but I've lived a relatively full life and I've had quite a bit of experience, worldly experience before I got to the army. Like travelled a fair bit. Did university, which a lot of people, like loads of officers, have done university, but actually going and living on your own for a bit is quite useful and gives you a bit of experience. So when someone comes to you with a problem, you're not fresh out of college or whatever, and you can actually maybe help them or know where to look. So that was good. However, I wasn't like some people are 27 or 28 when they turn up, and they have obviously a lot more worldly experience, and the world makes a bit more sense to them. So you see people like that progress a little bit quicker because they've just got a little bit more common sense and a little bit more experience. They know when someone's pulling the wool. They know what to see and what to expect. And I think I was in the middle of that. I was definitely naive and had a lot of work to do to deal with some of my flaws, which weren't completely ironed out by training. And I was definitely at times probably over pally with people. Not the worst type, but was definitely could have been a bit more strict down the line. But yeah, I think middle ground of my age, I think.
Yeah. The military life is very unpredictable, I suppose, in a sense. You can be moved around all over at quite a short notice. How do you find balancing that with your relationships of the people around you and back home?
Yeah. So I was thinking before about relationships in the army. And I've been for a year or so. I've been thinking a lot about it. It's like kind of a theme of therapy and things like that, kind of things I'm trying to address. But I think a lot of people find it very easy to use the army as an excuse to not address issues of relationships and friendships and things like that. And I've had my fair share of failed relationships and whatnot, and being in the army, not being in the army might have helped that, might have addressed some of it. But fundamentally, the army had nothing to do with that. That's about my ability to communicate with people. Whereas at times I probably use the army as an excuse not to do certain things, or I wouldn't tell people as soon as I knew. The army is good at, in some ways, some circumstances, giving you notice before you go and do things. And it's about how you communicate that to your partner, which doesn't breed resentment, which can then hopefully allow you to have a good relationship in a romantic sense anyway. And I definitely didn't do that over the last 4 or 5 years or so. Just too busy trying to be a cool platoon commander and save the world and volunteering for everything and being silly. And not achieving them things, even not saving the world at all. But yeah, I'd say the army makes it a little harder, but if your relationship's failed, it's nothing to do with the army, or it's fundamentally on you and the way you communicate that. Me, perhaps using the army as an excuse not to go to certain things, or assuming that my partner might feel a certain way about something, and putting words in their mouth before I've even spoken to them, kind of breeds resentment in them for the army. And because you're part of the army, it's almost resentment towards you. Yeah. And when you then argue back and say the army's great, it's done this for me, they're like, well, look what it's done to us. And it's not the army's fault, mate. It's I've done this and I haven't told you about it. I haven't properly explained to you what the problem is. So that's where I stand on the relationship side of things. You've got to take responsibility for it. There's definitely ways you can fix things or make the right choice without using it as some sort of cover. It does make it slightly more difficult depending on obviously what jobs you're in. But I don't think it has to be the be all and end all. I don't think it has to put extra strain on. It's about how you address it. Yeah. In regard to friendships, the theme of this podcast being like the lonely chapter.
Indeed, yeah.
So I didn't have a very specific period of time that was a lonely chapter. I think I'm probably still in it somewhere. Okay. I think it's super long and I'm still in it. And there are parts of the lonely chapter which are more lonely than others.
Okay.
All right, which is an interesting way to put it. But I'm very lucky with my friends, and this could be me taking them for granted. But they're always around, and they always want to see me when I'm back from something, or they're always there when I want to do it. And not one of them was like, I don't want to speak to you, or don't want to be around you because you're joining the army, or you're doing this, or you're going away on this, or you're prepping for that. They're all just there, happy to talk to me regardless, even if they move around a lot. making the effort and being as good.
Yeah.
However, when you're away for 6 months doing something, you can't see them, and that's where things get particularly lonely. And yeah, depending on what you're doing, whether you're bettering yourself on some quest or whatever, or doing some challenge or something silly like that, you are alone fundamentally. Even if they don't disagree with what you're doing, they're not there to help you.
And you mentioned during that, towards the start of that sort of bit, about therapy. How long have you been using therapy, and what's that experience been like for you? So
yeah, I've been doing like therapy, and then by therapy I mean I've been sitting with a therapist and talking to them about various issues for about a year, just under a year, on and off, based around work and other commitments. Yeah, and it's been really good. I think I found probably a few years ago I found that I wasn't particularly happy in certain areas of my life, and I hadn't addressed certain things. I think there are golden threads to my life, and they're all connected. And the golden thread I keep referring to is about self-worth and how you view yourself and whether or not you're worthy of certain things. And that's all founded in a rational belief about, impacts, things that happened to me as a child and things like that. And one golden thread that fits directly into that, it's an extension of it, is my relationship with my dad, basically. So he's around, but he wasn't there when I grew up. My mum raised me alone. And as an only child, and I absolutely had a great upbringing. Like, it was super good. Went on holidays loads and had a really good time. Mum worked really hard for things, and she had a really good network of friends who were essentially family.
Yeah.
But I realised that it's a lot of pressure for a single mum to raise you, and it resulted in me being quite lonely a lot of the time, especially as a young kid. And when I was young, I thought it was normal. I just thought it was absolutely normal for you to just be raised by your mum and not talk about it. And that's one thing. And in addition to that, I was kind of like my dad's secret. Like, he had a family with someone else, which was a bit sad. And I was a child of an affair. And I again knew about that probably too young, I'd say. I knew about that.
Oh, you did know about that?
Oh yeah, like from my earliest memory, I just knew that was the thing. I thought that was cool. Whatever. That's chill, innit? Whatever, just move on. Just deal with it. I just had no idea, because it was just all I knew, so I was just working it. And when I was a kid, it didn't bother me too much. Just got on with it. Probably had trouble making friends, not as a direct result, but because I was just a bit alone. Didn't really know social skills in primary school and stuff. As I got older, I into a teenager, I remember just getting angry really quickly and not believing I was capable of doing certain things. Just basically, I felt a bit like a spare part.
Yeah.
And because I'm a bit of a, just a bit, I don't want to say a bit of a bloke, but I just didn't want to talk about it or address it. And you don't do these things. And I think the first time I properly thought about how it might have affected me later is when I was talking to my mate at uni, and he was like, "Oh, where's your mum and dad?" And I just casually explained the situation to him. And he was like, "That's not normal, that." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "That's not like, I grew up with my mum and my dad, and then they later divorced. That's all right. You're, and even then, like, I hadn't met the rest, like my dad's half of the family. You know what I mean? I was a grown man essentially at that stage. It was very interesting. But yeah, I realised it basically had a bit of effect on me, and it's probably why I acted out a lot as a teenager, did silly things. It got, you occasionally get mixed up in the wrong crowds and stuff, and just do dumb stuff, and get into fights at school and things. I just never touched on it. And then I realised after going to therapy that this irrational issue of self-worth and am I good enough for something, because I discount myself from everything or certain things, because I'd be like, well, what's the point? Or someone would cancel a trip with me, or wouldn't be available to see me when they said they were, and I'd be like, oh, it's because they just don't want to see me. It's cool. Yeah. Which is irrational. These are all irrational thoughts. I can't prove that that's what they're saying or doing. I had a friend of mine who I invited him to a party we were having, and he had to leave early because of it was a random excuse, but he had to leave early, and I immediately was like, he's left because I'm crap. Like, I'm worthless. Like, he's just left. Yeah. And then you address these things, and it's, these things take time to go away and address, whatever. When I spoke to my psychotherapist, he took me through some cognitive behavioural stuff, and essentially what he called the ABCDs, and you essentially follow the flow chart, fill it in with rational thoughts, and at the end you come out with an answer which is, this guy left this event because of this issue, and it's nothing to do with.
As you break it down into parts, right?
Like if you look at this, it has nothing to do with you as a person, and then off that, if you read that last statement saying this had nothing to do with you, mate, or whatever, and you still think an irrational thought, you just put that irrational thought back in,
right,
and it comes out again. And I do that for loads of little things.
Okay.
Because there's no reason why I should think this way about myself. Like, I've done some pretty incredible things in my life, done some really interesting things. I like to think I'm a good person. I haven't let anyone down, but it was really interesting to actually unpack that with someone and talk about it. And it helped me. And I appreciate there's probably people out there who it won't help because of different issues and other things they've got going on. But yeah, I felt like I just needed to address it. Last year I was going through some things and I was like, I need to unpack this. I need to go and sit down.
It's good that you noticed that and took the initiative to seek the help, and it sounds like you've made some improvements for sure. Do you think joining the army and the pressures that added on top of those feelings, or was it just a compounding over time regardless of the army or regardless of university or anything that happened?
I think there's an element of kind of the army demands a lot from you. That you're constantly graded, you're constantly told where you're going, how your potential, that kind of thing, which is good and bad. So you're aware of what's going on. But that can put a lot of pressure on you. Getting graded worse one year from the next, or whatever, can kind of play into your mind, especially if you're quite a young officer going in and your first report's really bad or whatever, and it usually is because of time served, and so it makes complete sense. But that could weigh on you, which isn't good. But yeah, I'd say it's probably relationships that probably played on it a bit more. I think because of just who I am, the nature of my upbringing, being alone a lot, I'd say I'm probably quite avoidant in relationships, which isn't ideal, depending on what your partner is.
Yeah.
But that doesn't help things, and I'd much rather not address issues than sit down and talk to them and properly unpack it.
Yeah, that's so common, isn't it?
Yeah, and it makes me like super uncomfortable. But it's absolutely something you need to do, and like that's kind of links to that previous point about like the army keeping you from doing stuff or putting pressure on your relationships. Like fundamentally, I was using the army to not do things or not address certain things, or being like, oh, I'm going away and there's nothing I can do about it, instead of I'm going away and these are the reasons why and this is why I want to. But yeah. So yeah, definitely some interesting pressures coming in.
Yeah. And in terms of the army, where it moves you in physical location, so you've been all over the UK, you've been abroad as well. How do you find that being potentially moved at any point? What sort of notice do you get when?
In fairness, you get quite a lot. Well, you do and you don't. You should at least get 6 to 8 months based on your next job. So understanding where your next job's going to be, where they're going, you do the research, you understand where that next battalion or next place is. So where you're going to move to, so you have time doing that. Like I spent time in Cyprus, so I knew I was going there about 6 months. Well, I say that about 8 months before I went, which is it's fine, but it's it's a long way away. I'd say you do get notice, enough, and soldiers get a lot, because a lot of them married, has houses and pads and stuff, and they need to move.
And do you look at that as, this is awesome, I get to travel, or is it a bit like, do you sometimes feel this is a bit difficult because I can't really settle in one place?
So it's still this is awesome, I get to travel. But that obviously entirely depends where you're going to. Cyprus was awesome. I really liked it. Just under a year out there, which is really good. But yeah, just moving around like the northwest of England was okay. Like somewhere new, and I did enjoy some of that. But yeah, it can get a bit jarring. Just fucking get in a van every 10 minutes and or every however long, and driving all your stuff around the country and stuff can be a bit tiresome. And yeah, it does. It would put some pressures on relationships. But again, early, tell them early, get used to it,
and they know what you do for a living.
Yeah, get a rail card.
Yeah,
Get
top tip.
Yeah, get a rail card. Yeah.
So anyone who might be listening who is thinking of the military, maybe specifically the army, as a career choice, or if they're just getting involved in starting that application process, is there any advice or tips you can give them, what to expect or things to get in order before going into that?
Loads of running. It's an easy one. Whilst I think of a proper one, and then there's like when you actually get to Sandhurst, it's like really boring people who talk about this guy called Field Marshal Slim a lot, and his entire remit on leadership was just be you, be plain you, right? And I hated hearing it because it was just really like, I think it's a complete sellout, right? But yeah, lo and behold, actually being yourself is relatively important when it actually comes to doing it. There's you can put on probably a persona for about 3 months, and then you'll just crack, and then everyone will see who you are. And especially when you're tired and you're stressed, they'll be like, "Oh, this guy actually isn't a really cool operator. He's crying at the bottom of his trench." So that kind of thing. So I'd say absolutely be yourself. Do the research and like find out where you want to go before you go, because the army is a vast beast. And
as in
like
battalion
units,
wise, or
no,
units?
just units.
Okay.
Like just find out what it is you actually want to do, and go for it. Obviously, the world is complex and changing all the time, and the requirement from the army is constantly changing. So it's really important to understand where you're going into, what you're going to join, where that unit will be based, what you will be doing in the next however long. Because you could find you join, and as you know, it's just not what you wanted, because you haven't done the research, done the visits beforehand. I probably found my Sandhurst experience a bit easier because I went to the unit I wanted to go to before and understood that's where I wanted to be, which made it a bit more clear cut. So yeah, I'd probably say that. Yeah, be yourself and enjoy it. Just ride the wave.
And the physical side of things, you mentioned there about running as the first thing that came into your mind, but it's actually a very important part. And you started running during university, I think, properly.
Yeah,
you got really into it.
So like running, yeah.
And,
so
yeah, just tell me a bit about like the fitness side of things and your journey through that.
So yeah. So I think I've always been into fitness. I think when I was at primary school, we used to just run at the beginning of every PE session. I realised I was good at that, running for a long time, and I never did anything about that. I just ran for a long time, never joined any clubs or anything. When I got to university, I realised that I was probably the only sport I'm good at. I'm useless at all sports as a rule, which isn't helpful in a northern battalion as well. So I love football. Is running. So I just joined the athletics club, and I ended up running at a decent level at British University competition sport and stuff. I say decent level, like I'd beat the layman on the street, but I would come 7th or 8th at this, like in various races, 1500 metre up to 10k cross country and stuff.
Still good.
Which is really good. But yeah, did boxing as well as an aside, and yeah, I'm definitely better at sports that just require you as opposed to stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so you spoke there about boxing and sports just involving yourself. So you've recently started jiu-jitsu as well. So talk to me a little bit about those and how you find those and what they offer you mentally as well as physically.
Yeah, I think that So I did boxing at university. I had a friend who was in a history class with me, and he said, just come to the club and see what you like about it. And I found it quite, it was really intense at first, quite daunting, really scary. But it's one of those things where when you actually do it over time, it really increases your confidence. Getting punched in the face is remarkable. Like you can learn loads from it, which was awesome. And I do genuinely think that like boxing as a sport does a lot for young people generally. And being in a uni boxing team, it shared a club with like a local club, and you met loads of interesting people and stuff. But yeah, I remember I had 3 boxing bouts, and I lost all 3 hilariously. And I remember not at all being bothered about losing these fights, and because I was achieving what I wanted to achieve in my life, and just got in the ring and had a good time. Like, yeah, I probably wouldn't tell my coach that at the time, but like I did want to win when I was in there. But I remember just thinking, yeah, cool, I got in the ring. That's
Getting
sick.
in the ring is a win,
that's
isn't
awesome.
Like,
yeah,
for most people.
Yeah, but I remember my second bout. It was the week after I got the acceptance letter from the army, and they were like, you've got a space now. so it was a week after that. So I got that letter and I was like, nailed it. Chill out now. Not interested. Whatever. So I was trained. I made weight for the fight. I remember getting in the ring and just being punched by this guy from the Isle of Wight who had 6 arms and stuff. Mate, it was lethal. And I was like, in the ring, everything I felt sluggish and slow, but I was just happy that I'd achieved kind of what I wanted afterwards.
Yeah.
And then obviously lost the fight. And I remember just being, my housemates who came to see me were like fuming. So like, can you just win one of these for Christ's sake? It's like 20 quid a ticket. Yeah, they came to my next one, which I then lost. Same guy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Larry 6 arms.
Yeah, Larry 6 arms, mate. Lethal. Moves so fast. But yeah, I remember I got that letter, and because I was successful, I took my feet off the gas, and I was just like, whatever. But yeah, like that's been a kind of another one of these golden threads that have come through. If I do super well in something, I'll just probably chill out. I won't pursue it super much, or I'll just nailed that. Going to chill for a bit, do something else.
Is that something you're more aware of now? And when it does happen, and your mind kicks in and says, "You've done that. Just chill out for a bit, mate." Yeah,
like so I'm consciously aware of it now, and I do think it's super important to try and address that stuff. I'm quite a physically fit bloke, and I'll do well on like running events and things like that, and it'll make you want to just chill or eat like crap the next few days because you've done X. But yeah, you really shouldn't, and should just keep going, see how far you can actually get. But suffering from success, I guess, is what you could maybe call it. But it's definitely something you need to address, because you can do, like, doing things in the army. If you do something particularly well, like, you can't lay off. You need to do it well again and again and again.
Yeah, there's no rest.
Just keep doing it. Yeah, so it's definitely something that I'd address. I'd seek to deal with. It's definitely something I'd seek to iron out. But yeah. I resonated with your point on the last podcast about like finding your way to chill out, I think. And obviously like stand-up comedy, the previous guest was like, it's obviously very intense, public speaking, really important. And I can kind of sympathize in the way that standing in front of a group of people and saying things and giving orders or trying to make them laugh regardless is very daunting, and you need to find a way to switch off from that. Boxing was that way for me, I think, at university. And then like recently, at a similar time I started therapy, I started doing jiu-jitsu as well, which was really good.
Which is a therapy of its own, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you just like you said, that you just think about the mat when you're on the mat, and you do, mate. When you're like me and you need to just survive on the mat for however long.
There's no way anyone can think about anything other than the mat when someone double their weight is trying to choke you out and succeeding.
You and do some horrible things to you on the mat and just twist you up. But yeah, I think it's really good, and usually almost every jiu-jitsu gym will have a good community, and it's awesome. But yeah, finding little things like that, little niche things to do, like really good at switching you off, and really complemented kind of like therapy and sorting mental health out.
I think mental health is spoken about in its own right, which is good, but we've also got to remember that it goes hand in hand with physical health, and whilst there are their own things, they do intertwine a lot. So having good physical health and good mental health puts you in the best place. I think if you try and just go down the mental health and you're very sedentary in your life, you're not going to find as much success as in if you mix it with that physical health as well. And even if that's just getting out for walks, walking to the shop when you might get a bus, just little things. But yeah, definitely like at the more aggressive end of the spectrum, I suppose, more intense. Yeah, jiu-jitsu and boxing and that sort of thing. It just puts you in the moment.
Yeah, it's a different kind of physical fitness, isn't it? Absolutely knocks it.
Yeah, being in the present is so important. So I think that's a really nice place to end today, and I just want to thank you for myself for coming on and speaking so openly as well about some of the things you have spoken about. Hopefully some people listening have taken as much as I have away from it, so I really appreciate that. I know you're not massive in social media, but if there's anything that you want to push, anything you got going on?
Nothing from me. Not huge on social media, like you say, but a colleague of mine is running 100 miles non-stop in Cyprus for a Ukrainian friend of his who's recently died in the war going on there. Yeah, and I'll give you the link, and you can put it in the bio of
absolutely.
of the show.
I'll put the link out.
But yeah, it's a good cause, and anyone who fancies donating to that would be awesome.
If you do want to donate to that, however little, however much you can afford, that's fine. I'll put the link in the show notes and on my Instagram. Our Instagram handle is @LonelyChapterPodcast. And lastly from me, thank you for listening.